All right. So we are now going to transition into our first nascent idea discussion. So NID, the host is Dan Johnson, who is from Wake Forest University. And as I mentioned at the beginning, these were conceived as a way to bring forward an idea for discussion. The moderator, the leader, is going to ask a series of questions, going to perhaps put us into breakout rooms, use us in all of the ways that they would like to pull ideas out of our brains, I believe is the intent of this session. And so for Dan's discussion today, it's going to revolve around an idea he has for a research coordination network in undergraduate biology education. So another RCN UBE like BioTap was, but this one would be for scientific writing instructors. So for those of you all that teach scientific writing in the lab and help TAs to foster the abilities to grade, I'm assuming. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dan.
So, thanks. And so we are going to be going from one extreme to the other. We are going from very polished, completed studies to a very raw idea that I'm wanting your opinion as to whether or not it's worth developing a project around, and if so, what it would be. And so what I want to do is just tell you a little bit about what we're thinking and why we're thinking this is important. And then I'm going to kick you out into breakout rooms with 3 questions that I want you to be thinking about. And I'm going to give you about 20 minutes or so, and I'll be popping in and out, and you'll be actually writing on a Google Doc. And this is a method that we're going to be trying out that I'm having to get used to the little idiosyncrasies of Zoom and Google Google Slides at the same time. I apologize. But what I want to do is I want to find out what your experiences have been around learning to write scientifically. Also, how you're training your people to write, teach scientific writing, and what kind of resources you'd like to see. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, Beth, can you see my slides and just my slides?
I can see your slides and only your slides and no notes.
Okay. Good thing you can't see the notes because the notes are wing it. So what we're talking about doing is dealing with the challenge. And one of the things that I've been doing for almost 24 years now is teaching TAs how to teach writing. And one of the things that we've had problems with is that students come in with no knowledge of what scientific writing really is. They've read a lot of literary writing and rhetoric, but most of our students come in having not actually ever read a scientific paper. So one of the challenges we have is teaching them how to write for a scientific audience. Now, one of the things that people don't realize is that when we teach students how to write a lab report, we're not just giving them the skill of writing like a scientist for a journal. Scientific writing and scientific communication is one of the most valued skills, not just in academics, but also in the job market. So if we can teach students how to write well, we are giving them a leg up in the job market. So this is a very practical tool. But the problem is that most of us were never taught how to teach writing. And there is a lot of work that's been done in this area, but it's not come over into the STEM disciplines. Now, adding to that, many of us are teaching in the intro courses that are too large to use scientific writing well. So we end up pushing it over into the laboratory courses, where we're not the ones who are teaching the writing. It's being taught by graduate students or undergraduates who are TAs, and they may not have very much experience writing, or they may be uncomfortable with it. So the question that we've been talking about in the STEM writing project is, how do we help to solve this problem? How can we find resources to uh, help alleviate this problem and make writing a bigger part of what we do? So what we've done is, and you'll see me use SWP, that's just an abbreviation for the STEM Writing Project. And that's the group that is actually, that I direct. It's based on an NSF grant that we got back in 2016. And what we've done is we've brought together a combination of evidence-based instructional practices, training techniques, and targeted technology support. And what we're doing is we're using that to teach writing in a more systematic way at scale. And if anybody's interested, I'll be happy to talk about the details of that. But one of the things that we're seeing is that there is a need to teach more students how to write. And 2 points where we're seeing that in particular are in the rise in the number of people who are doing course-based undergraduate research experiences. Many of those are requiring their students to write, but they don't know how to be able to train their students in a systematic way to write like professionals do, or even how to evaluate where their starting point is for their students. The other thing that we're seeing, and this comes to what's been a theme for our speakers up to this point, has been the unequal student preparation. And that can be based on socioeconomic status, racial issues, cultural backgrounds, any number of possibilities. But we have to face the fact that some of our students are coming in less prepared to write in a scientific fashion. So we see that as an area where a systematic approach might be useful. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'll put up 3 links in the chat. One of them will be to a Google Doc, and I've got 3 questions that I'll show you in just a moment. And I'm wanting we'll split everybody up at random into about a half dozen breakout rooms. And I want you to just think about the 3 questions, and I've got a couple prompts under them, and start jotting down your ideas. What has been your experience? What would you like to see? And I'm going to give you about 20 minutes to do that. And then we're going to come back for the rest of the time. I want to see what has surfaced and some ideas that you might have, and also start building on those. So what am I going to ask you? First is, I want to get an idea for a possibility of the grant of how did you learn scientific writing? And was the way you learned really that effective? And if you're teaching TAs, how are you training them to teach scientific writing? And what are you doing? And are you satisfied with that? And is that method based on a systematic approach, or is it one that you've sort of cobbled together from different sources? The other thing I want you to be talking about is the user needs. What would you want to learn about teaching writing? What training and tools and resources would you need? And the last thing is, if we decide, would you want to be part, if we decided to write for an RCN, would you be interested in being part of that project, either as a participant and part of the network, or potentially as one of the leaders in the program? And what potential barriers might keep you from being part of that? So I'm going to stop sharing. Come on. And I'm going to put 3 links. The first is the slides, if you want to go back to it. The second is the live doc that everyone should be able to edit. So I'm going to kick everyone out into 5 rooms. And if you're wanting to know a little bit more about what the RCN would look like, I'll also give you a link to the project summary if you want to take a look at that. So I'll let everybody get started, start talking, start typing. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. Before I forget, my colleague, who is actually a former Shannon, which cohort were you in as a biotap scholar?
Well, I can't remember the second one, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Stephanie's saying second.
Yeah.
So I have to give Shannon a shout out because a lot of what we've been talking about from writing, she helped to develop. So I'm definitely not going to take credit for all this. She's been an equal partner in all of this. Any problems though, I'll take the blame, Shannon. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to get a sense of what you saw as your major challenges and what your needs were. And I'll make this document will be available for a little while longer, and then I'll post it for everyone who is interested. One of the things that at looking at this that really stands out, and this was something that we had a question about, was that very few people seem to have had any kind of formal training in the methods of how to teach writing, and that this is something a lot of people would like to see. Now, one of the things that this RCN is being, that this potential RCN is being built on, is the idea that there is a very large body of writing in the disciplines literature that almost no one knows about, seems to know about. So there's going back almost 25 years of extensive research in how to teach scientific writing more effectively, but it's almost all read and used and the writing by writing instructors. There's very little of it's coming to us. So one of our goals in this project would be to bring that forward. The other thing that really jumped out was that it seemed like most everybody has a sort of cobbled together strategy for teaching writing. There were a few people said they had a specific model, but seemed like everybody is doing it as this seems right, rather than any particular general strategy. One of the other things that somebody actually wrote, and I thought was particularly interesting, well, they were talking about their rubric that they were using, and that, here it is. They said, we do not have time to teach a lot about how to grade and provide feedback on assignments. We designed a 77-point rubric for all GTAs to use to grade. And I want you to think about that. To use that, how much time is it taking a TA to go through those 77 points and make a decision? If they're taking 15 seconds, that ends up being around 20, 21 minutes per paper, just for making the point decisions. And that adds up. So one of the questions that we're actually been facing, and that we have a pretty good solution for, is to reduce the number of items and pick the items that are most important. But how do you do that? And how do you do that at scale? And that's one of the things that we're considering for this RCN, is providing a model for teaching people how, or teaching programs how to pull that information out. Needs. One of the things that seems to come up over and over is the needs for dealing with diversity of TAs, and the challenge of consistency between TAs. That's something that has come up quite a bit in our own program, and it's not something that can be solved easily. I don't think we've solved it completely. We still have TAs who grade unevenly, but there are strategies for simplifying the evaluation to see if a TA is doing their job, but that requires them to be trained. So the question that goes back to the first question of how do we train them? So one of the last points I wanted to talk about, and then I'm going to open this up. I want to hear your thinking, your follow-up ideas. One of the things that we've tried to focus on in the writing project is finding outcomes that can be done more systematically and preferably using technology support, using things like learning analytics, text analytics, computational linguistics, that allow you to make evaluations that are independent of individuals. So you have something to ground truth of your TA's performance against. And that's something that seemed like very few people have. Now, those are my initial thoughts and just a quick glance as we've talked. What I want to hear now is what other questions you have, or what other points that you have concerns about, or that you would want to know about, and that you would like to see addressed in a research coordination network rather. First question came from Judy. If the rubric alleviates the need for additional comments, does it really take extra time if you have an extensive rubric? Depends on how the students are using it. One of the things that we found was that a lot of students weren't actually taking the comments that they were getting and applying them to their writing. They were using some of them, but not all of them. And there's actually a fairly good body of literature saying that students can only use so many comments. And so you need to prioritize which comments you want to have them spend the most time on. So one of the things that we're recommending, or we are using rather, is using a rubric that has a much narrower set of criteria for establishing grades. And this was the rubric that Shannon, who I pointed out earlier, helped to develop, that you can grade much more quickly, and you can focus and put comments that are addressing that student's individual challenges. And this goes to the individual instruction that we were hearing about earlier in the earlier session, that students need some individual attention, but at the same time, we need to move them to a standardized model that is the standard for the scientific community. And that is the expectation when they'll be writing. Audrey, you were asking about, do I want to look at student writing or how TAs are commenting? Both. One of the things that, this is not published work, but a couple of years back, I actually spent a faculty learning community year actually looking at TA comments on lab reports. And we used a set of TA comments that had been hand annotated to look at what they were commenting on and how they were commenting, whether it was primarily copy editing or was looking at what the student could do to improve, and those kinds of structure of the comments. And we actually started writing a classifier that would allow us to look at that at scale. So the actual model, not bragging, I'm just putting it in context, we had 88,000 TA comments that were used to train the classifier. And we were able to use that classifier and analyze with about 80% accuracy and get that done in 10 minutes. So it went from something that took all summer to be analyzed down to 10 minutes. So the idea of using analytics to look at what TAs are saying it's a challenge, but it's not one that can't be addressed using some technology support. And that's one of the things we would like this research coordination network to start sharing is how to build these tools, and they're not built on proprietary software. This is using R, which is free. And the idea is to make all the materials available and scalable for free or as low a cost as possible. So any other questions or how to get the writing center staff helping you? They would love to be here to help. We actually spent a number of years working with ours, and the center actually underwent a change in how it was being managed. So we lost this collaboration, but for several years, we actually had a direct collaboration with our local writing center. And one of the things you can do is ask them, what do they feel that they can help the students with that is independent of the way you're wanting your students to write, and what do you need to do locally? And then give the TAs a very clear idea of how to separate a student's writing. What are the problems in it? Is this something they need to go to the writing center for help, or do they need to work with the TA? Or is this something the TA is not comfortable with and they need to talk to somebody who's more senior? So I think it's not one or the other. You need to decide where that boundary is based on who your local people are and what they are feeling comfortable doing. Amy asked, is the practice of peer review and revision a piece you will examine? I've not looked at it in the work that I'm doing, but I'll put Shannon on the spot. That she has been looking a lot more into the challenge of how to get peer review working effectively. I know that a couple people have got good peer review programs that they felt comfortable with, but Shannon, did you want to chime in with any ideas?
This semester, for the first time, we are going to be using a group peer review. So in the past, we've done one-on-one where two students would look at a lab report and make comments or whatever as if they were a TA. We're not going to do that this year. I don't think the students are necessarily ready for it in those freshman classes. So we're going to do something like it, but where everybody gets an opportunity to look at many papers so that a student's reviewed paper might be seen by 8 or 10 or 15 other students. And what they'll be reviewing, it'll be a guided review. So the TA will talk about hypothesis, and so that everyone will circle the hypothesis or something like that. We haven't done it yet, so I don't know how it's going to work.
So check back in a year. I think Shan, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've tried at least 6 different ways of doing peer review.
Yeah, they're just a little bit not quite experienced enough across the board. Some are really great at it and some are not. And when you only have 2 people looking at each lab report, then your ability to get reliable peer review is limited.
Okay. Audrey asked about how do I see the network and information sharing happening in the RCN? Actually, perfect segue, Audrey. And I promise we didn't plan it. I actually put the link back again. This is a link to a 4-page project summary. One of the pages is the document that we used for information gathering today and getting an idea of what people's interest is. The actual project that we are looking at, there's a 2-page summary. The goal would be to cut this down even further into a 1-pager to send to the NSF to get an initial view, see what they think, and hear back from the program officer for the RCN UBE program. And if we do not have enough interest or time to build the project this year, not ruling out the possibility of waiting a year, and instead of doing an incubator this year, actually going for the full grant next year. But the goal would be to take this 4-page document and strip it down to 1 page. But anybody who's interested, that document's there, and we can talk offline. We can talk during, I'll be there for happy hour tonight, social hour tonight, and answer any questions anybody has. So do we have any other questions? I'm going to ask one more. This was the first time we ever did the nascent idea discussion. I'm not asking whether it went well or not. I'm asking, what would you like to change, like to keep, like to add, or not have in the future? So I'm not going to ask you to put it into the chat, but I am going to ask that you put it into the feedback that we get from Beth. We are doing a feedback. I'm sorry, Frank.
I'll send out a post-conference survey. Yep.
Thank you. So please, this was the first time, and we definitely want to see what this program looks like and how we might use this more in the future. So in closing, what I want to say is that I appreciate everyone's comments, and don't know where we're going to be going just yet, but your insights have been very valuable. So thank you.
Hey, Dan, oops, put my video back on. This is Beth. I noticed on the Google Doc that people wrote, yeah, I'd be interested in participating, but they didn't necessarily put their name. Do you want them to give you a name, or if they have
in order to maintain privacy, some people may not feel comfortable. You can either put it on the document, but if you don't feel comfortable, my email is in the chat. So anybody who's interested and doesn't feel comfortable putting their name or their email onto the shared doc, and I'll pull that so it's not openly editable as soon as we get finished this afternoon. But if anybody is interested, I invite you to contact me.
Perfect. I know that in putting together these RCN UBEs, it's really important to get broad interest. It's really important to know, not only who wants to be perhaps on a PI team, but who would want to be on a steering committee, or who would want to just help collect data. And those are all different ways that you can engage, with an RCN UBE. And so there's lots of opportunities for you to scale it up to what you are capable of giving. I mean, knowing that we're all tired and that sometimes the thought of doing more is
one more grant, one more application.
One more, but it's really exciting, and RCN UBEs are great programs, and this is I think it's a great idea. Perfect.